Welcome back, everybody, to Left Reckoning. We're joined tonight by our friend, Victor Pougy. Victor Pougy is a Brazilian journalist, formerly at The Intercept, and he's going to be hanging out with us a little bit, talking about Bolsonaro's brave fight with hiccups, along with some Lula news, and basically this really invigorating story down in Brazil. But before we get to all that, how are you doing tonight, Victor?
Pretty good, guys. Thanks for having me. And, we're all sending the best wishes to our warrior hiccups who have been stuck with Bolsonaro for 10 days now. So, it must be hard.
Oh, man, can you imagine smelling one of those hiccups? Just the rancid.
Okay,
Right.
This is like the latest breakingest news in the East Front is that, he was rushed to the hospital after having had hiccups for 10 days. And apparently, they drained 1 kilo of poop out of his intestine through a tube up his nose.
Oh,
so
Lord.
oh my God, can you imagine?
I mean, this is really,
Reap what
is.
you sow. So, phrase which I heard around here.
Can you imagine having the country's best doctors and hospitals at your disposal, and then having the hiccups for 10 days, and then having to be rushed to the hospital? Why wouldn't you get that shit checked out before? It's just weird.
No, his body definitely needs to be studied by science for a long time, because as you were joking before, I don't think I've ever seen a world leader in a hospital gown as many times as I've seen Bolsonaro over the past few years.
I think this is actually a pretty awesome illustration of the difference between the Protestant and the Catholic ethic with regards to this stuff. Remember Trump had COVID, and they wouldn't let him he wouldn't let anyone take photos of him in the hospital, or he won't be pictured without his suit and looking strong, whereas Bolsonaro as a true Catholic is trying to make a martyr out of him and suffer publicly and try to get people to feel sorry for him. It's where the cultural difference really shines through.
Well, we can poke fun at Bolsonaro, because this story that we're going to be told and presented by Victor truly is horrifying. Brazil just crossed the grisly statistic that way over 500,000 people have passed away from the COVID-19 pandemic. And there's obviously so much context that's needed, but I think we should try to focus on what is the most inflammatory revelation that has come out of these congressional inquiries into Bolsonaro and his camp. That essentially there has been a huge embezzlement scheme regarding some of the potential vaccines for the COVID-19 pandemic. Could you just sort of present to us, I know it's hard and a lot, but we try to be a little bit brief. What's been going on with COVID-19 over the past, few months in Brazil, and what this congressional inquiry is and what it's found?
Yeah. Pandemic began as it began everywhere with people scared and not knowing what to do. And from day one, Bolsonaro was kind of positioning himself against the pandemic, not as someone who's like fighting against it, but someone who's like not believing it real. I think for a while, like his thinking was that, it's unpopular to have people stay at home. It's unpopular like to close bars and restaurants, and he would have like let everyone else do the hard bits, and he would be like the guy who's like standing up for the little guys who can't get their haircuts or whatever. So this was like initially the thing, but then it started escalating the pandemic, right, into real because it's the first, right, in the first week it's always like, oh, some guy that like arrived from Italy like is sick, and no one could really imagine how grave it would be. But then it turned out it was going to be really, really serious. And the governors, because Brazil, much like the US, is like a relatively decentralized federation, so each state's government has a relative autonomy. So it was governors that were charging forward with the sanitary measures. And it kind of became polarized, and like, the Bolsonaro guys are the ones who are like, screw this, like we're not staying home. And the opposition, which in the beginning was only like left-wing parties, but now like center-right and like neoliberals are grouping them together as Bolsonaro becomes so unpopular. But so this was the beginning. Bolsonaro kind of like sabotaging the sanitary measures, but it started really to escalate when the São Paulo governor started appearing more in the media. He's like a right-wing guy who was kind of like elected in a pro-Bolsonaro kind of a ticket in São Paulo. But he has presidential ambitions. Everyone knows that. So when he started shining as an anti-COVID guy, Bolsonaro like started really boycotting him, and that's when we saw how far he was willing to take this posture. So we see this guy in São Paulo who's a really horrible guy. Like, no credit to him, even though like he deserves some credit here. But and São Paulo has a public health and a public health industrial park that is relatively developed, and they like from day one like they had a partnership with a Sinovac, the Chinese pharmaceutical company that was producing vaccines, and the idea was to have a transfer of technology and start producing this vaccine here in Brazil, which was something that's a good thing that most people would be for. But Bolsonaro was really scared of this guy being associated with such a positive thing, so he started boycotting that vaccine, and he started boycotting every single vaccine, right? So everything was so disastrous. He was like sabotaging the social distancing. He was flaunting, mask. It wasn't like mandates. It wasn't mandatory, but it was recommendation that people should wear masks, and he was not. He was like making fun of it. He was like, and then he was pushing these medications that don't really work against COVID. I think like Trump flirted with that as well, but he quickly abandoned it. Bolsonaro doubled, tripled down. It still is. But then it got so bad that the opposition decided to do a congressional investigation, which is I guess similar to how it does in the U.S. Right? It's a right of the minorities. It's right of the opposition to have this, and it has like subpoena powers and all that stuff. They can like have people come and give explanations about things, all that stuff about the pandemic mismanagement. And the first thing that really jumped out was the fact that Pfizer, the pharma company, multinational, wanted to use Brazil as kind of the showcase for their vaccine. So the idea was that we're going to like vaccinate Brazil. It's going to work. And then like we're going to sell our vaccines to the rest of the world using like pointing to Brazil as an example of as a success story, right? But then it turns out, and this was something that came out with a congressional investigation, as they had the CEO of Pfizer come and give testimony. They had, all kinds of people that were involved in that, and they got access to their emails. And, there was like literally like dozens of emails from the Pfizer people to the like Ministry of Health, to the Brazilian embassy in the US, to the, foreign minister, anyone they could think that like may have like the year of the president or email like, hey, we really want to sell these vaccines to you guys, and they were like ignoring. And for a lot of the time, like people were like trying to rationalize all this stuff into like some like this ideological framework. Wow, Bolsonaro's an anti-vaxxer, that's why he doesn't want to do this thing. Or like, oh no, Bolsonaro is not like sabotaging this because he doesn't want to like help the governor of Sao Paulo like produce his own vaccine and be popular in that. And all this speculation like to try to explain why is he behaving like that. But as it turns out, they were just boycotting those because they had a grift running on other vaccines, right? So they were like resisting to these vaccines because they had a different one that they were hoping to buy and in which they get money
and
on
just
the side. Right?
So despicable the way that they rationalize it too about the Pfizer vaccine, right? Bolsonaro says stuff about I think you mentioned when we were talking earlier about the clauses for Pfizer. He said like, well, what if you take Pfizer vaccine and it turns you into an alligator, right? Like just like the worst kind of anti-vax rhetoric.
Yeah, and you know, like there's I love like presenting Brazilian expressions and idioms, but this one's really good, which is that, like, you know, if these motherfuckers could fly, we'd never see the sunlight. You know, we'd never get any sunlight. Which is that, you know, like,
I like that.
these guys are really horrible, and like and you know, like, they don't give a shit. Like, you know, they're like running, like trying to get, you know, like $1 a dose, like on as a, you know, a side gig where like half the country's dying. But yes, you know,
Wait, can we just put this in clearer terms, right? So this like embezzlement scheme is that Bolsonaro basically has friends or a kind of middleman situation going on for these later vaccines that come in.
Yeah. So the thing started, which is, you know, as you know, with Brazilian politics recently, the whole cast of characters is very wacky and crazy. But it all started when there's this a guy who was a new to politics kind of guy. He was elected in the huge Bolsonaro wave, and you know, his shtick, his thing is that he immigrated to the U.S. And you know, got rich, and he has all like this, you know, get rich quick schemes, you know, like in the rise and grind, you know, mindset. You know, he's a huge mindset guy with a like specific kind of people who like immigrate to the US, right? So like his Twitter handle is just like, you know, John Smith USA, you know, stuff like that, right? So he gets elected, and as a like a pro Bolsonaro guy, he was like, you know, oh yeah, like screw all this stuff, let's change it. Whatever. Turns out this guy's brother is a public servant, like in you know, within the bureaucracy of the health minister. He's the guy who signs the invoices for importing and exporting. And it turns out that you know, he got like this really shady document for buying of Indian-made vaccine, which is not really in use anywhere. It's not really ready. Like it's not ready yet, right? It's in the development phase. And, you know, fair enough, most vaccines were bought while they were still being developed, but this one is like way behind the others. It's more expensive, and it's not approved by the Brazilian equivalent of the FDA. But then this guy, like, he's got this really shady document that looked like weird. You know, there was like, instead of paying directly to the pharmaceutical company, he was paying through like a middleman in Singapore, and he thought this whole thing was shady. And he told like his brother, like, hey, you know, there's something wrong here. Tell the president that you know, there's a problem here, because both of them were like with the idea that like, oh, Bolsonaro is like this very honest guy, and he wouldn't want any corruption to happen. So it's just a matter of him not being informed, because of course, if you tell him, he's going to sort it out, right? That was the logic they were operating under. So this guy comes up and says, look, there's like this really shady contract. I'm getting like calls from a lot of people higher up who are like pressuring me to move forward with this. So his brother allegedly alerted Bolsonaro about it. Was like, hey, look, this is wrong. And then Bolsonaro allegedly said, oh, forget about that. Like, this is Ricardo Barros stuff. Like, don't mess around with this stuff. Like, just let it run, because this is someone's grift, you know, that I'm not going to touch. And, you know, that someone was the leader of the government in Congress. He was a former health minister who was a health minister during the Temer government, who was a neoliberal government that came to power after the coup. So like, this guy who has like this very deep, very wide connection to the shady underworld of like health grifting within the Brazilian public health system. But, you know, Bolsonaro was alerted that this shady stuff was going on and didn't do anything. It was kind of like saying like, yeah, let's just turn a blind eye to it. And from there, like, it started growing. So there's now histories of other shady contracts like that, all in the same vein, right? Like weird middlemen appearing and inserting themselves, claiming to represent companies that they don't really represent. Or, you know, and, you know, there's like this figure of like, oh, there's like police officer who also sells vaccines, or, you know, and so this is the gist of it, right? The people within the government were sabotaging the legit vaccines that are available because they wanted the non-legit vaccines to be purchased because that's the one they would make money in. Basically, that's the gist of it.
It's just so rich to remind people. I know most people listening to this are very familiar with the Lula case and the allegations against him. But for people who are not, I'll just give you the quick, skinny version of it, which is that Lula, a president who pulled millions of people out of poverty, immensely popular, gets wrapped up in these allegations of corruption that effectively boil down to him getting some renovations done for cheap on an apartment at a beach in Brazil that's not even the most popular ritzy beach or anything like that, right? And these were all proven to be false and incorrect, by the way. But I'm just saying, like, even at like their allegation, that was the level of allegation that was enough to topple somebody like Lula. And Bolsonaro sort of rises up in the chaos of this as somebody, oh, I'm against corruption, I'm not of this kind of world. And now, after coming to power with, by the way, it has to be noted, American government support, is now somebody who is implicated in a corruption scandal that is not only immense, but is so egregious and anti-human that it's really hard to overstate the severity of this.
Stakes of public health. Like, the public health is at stake. It's not Lula. Like, even if that was all true, it's not like hundreds of thousands of people could die from it.
Yeah, it's like vaccines to a deadly disease, and they're like running shenanigans on the like acquiring these vaccines because they are like running a grift.
Yeah, you're right. Not only taking money off of the top, but denying other solutions too. Yeah, that's a very important
and
point.
even like let's say like they were like taking money off the top of a thing that was like superbly well run and working properly. Like, these guys are like taking money off the top of something that's not even working well, right? There's like this idea in Brazil, like, because corruption is so widespread, there's this image of politician that's like, yeah, he's corrupt, but he gets things done, right? It's kind of like a qualifier that people have. Yeah, like, he's kind of shady, but at least he delivers the goods. Bolsonaro doesn't either. He's like, takes all the money, but he doesn't do anything. But I think this all like these corruption investigations that we're seeing now it's kind of like the cherry on top of a poop flavored sundae that is the last few weeks of Bolsonaro's government. And now we're seeing, like, as all things collapse, that old corruption grifts that he ran when he was like a federal congressman are starting to come up as well. And these are all like, small time grift kind of stuff that, like, benefiting like your friends and all, like, the police officers, people like, ex-wife, like brother of his wife, all this kind of stuff. And he is like super implicated in both him and his sons, who have been politicians since they were, kids almost. Like one of his kids, number 2, he refers to his kids by the numbers, right? Like that's how healthy his outroll is. It's like 01, 02, and 03.
Yeah.
But 02 ran, and they had to like get a special permission for him to run because he wasn't 18 yet, but like he would have been 18 by the time he took office. So, it was allowed, but he was running like as he was 17, and he was just like getting votes from his dad, right? And his dad was basically controlling the whole thing. And the scheme that he was running, like Bolsonaro was running on all of his kids' offices, was of hiring fake workers, right? So, I get elected, and then I'm like, hey, Matt, hey, David, like, I have this thing, like, now that I'm elected, I get to hire like 4 people. So, I'm just going to put your names down. Like, you say you're employed by me. You keep like $1,000 and kick back to me the rest of the salary. It's good for you. Like, you get some money without having to do any work, and I get all my money back. So this is the kind of stuff that he was running. small time corrupt like Rio de Janeiro like underworld that got like propelled to the presidency of the largest country in the continent and, you know, one of the largest economies in the world. So it's just this kind of ethos that is working, that he brings to the office. And so now we have like he is really in a very bad situation, to the point where you know, even he is seeing the writing on the wall that he cannot be elected. Like if things remain as they are, he's going to lose badly, which brings us to a very dangerous place, because you know it's when these you know, it's when dogs are cornered that they attack, right? So that is a risk for
and all your families
not accepting.
Like that's the thing, is like you've gone so entrenched in it that all the people around you, like, you have to fight for them kind of too. Like the incentive to fight it out is huge. That's terrifying.
Yeah, there's no reason for him to you know, let it go, you know, unless like some people offer him some sort of deal, like, yeah, you know, just leave us alone and no one will prosecute you. But yeah,
I think there's like a sort of dark coalition of just criminality that is under maybe examined in right-wing politics. Like we talked about that stat of Lula cutting 80% of illegal deforestation down between 2004 and 2012. What do you think those illegal deforesters do? Like, right, like that's capitalized criminality, right? And I also think Trump spoke for that in America too, right? Like you have all this class of sort of like not the biggest, but like ultimately like scammers and criminals. Like I want a book on that. Verso should get on that or something like that.
I got some contacts we can call them.
Yeah.
It's the militia ethos, like, because this is something that you know, Bolsonaro is very much a creature of Rio de Janeiro, right? And you know, they run like these like schemes. It's just like these grifts that are just embedded into the running of society, right? So it's like either like garbage collection, you know, they have territory control, and then, you know, shenanigans with garbage collection, or, you know, motorbike deliveries, or gas bottles, because, you know, you cook with gas here, and some people have you know, the line connected, or some people need to buy these bottles and then they control the bottles, or you know, water, selling water, cable TV, you know, all this stuff. There's like these small, not small time, but like medium time criminals, but they like become like embedded in the like fabric of the state, right? And the thing you said about like these illegal deforestation, like wildcat mines, that's exactly it. It's he appeals to the kind of people who are like, have this like, you know, ethos of, I can just go myself and you know, like, fucking like, I'm gonna go find gold and I'm gonna like strike gold and I'm gonna get rich, and like, if only like these motherfuckers like will let me use mercury and you know, destroy everything, like it'll be all right, you know. And Bolsonaro's whole thing is about like removing like these barriers to you doing whatever the fuck you want to do. So he's like removing penalties for driving dangerously. Like he's like saying, oh, you're not forced any longer to have a car seat for your kid. Like it's all these things that, like, you know, I just want to do whatever the fuck I want and not be accountable to anyone. And it's the sort of stuff. But yeah. But now, you know, Bolsonaro's government, and this is something I said just a second. Whatever, I dropped my pencil, but I was not writing anything. That his government is heavily militarized.
Yes.
And these corruption things are getting to these military officers, right? Like it was a general in charge of the health ministry during all this stuff, and now the army is like putting out notes threatening to be like, oh, we won't accept like to have our like names dragged to the mud. Like, you shouldn't accept your generals like doing these scripts, you know what I mean? But then when a congressional investigation like finds out, and they start threatening. So yeah, it's dangerous and seems to be unfurling quickly.
And just to remind people, American listeners who aren't familiar, I mean, remember that like Dilma and like Lula come up in opposition to military dictatorship, right? These kind of questions are very, very serious and present in Brazilian politics. Is threat of military intervention. You know, when we were talking about it recently, you had mentioned that like Bolsonaro's relationship with the military is he was sort of like the champion of like the petty officer, of like the small time officer, both in his time in the military and post. Could you sort of describe how that's
expelled? He was expelled from the military.
Yeah, and could you? I mean, maybe mention that story too, because it's very. I mean, it's very much tied to that as well, right? He was he was an intermilitary terrorist to fight for like petty officers' pay, correct?
Yeah, exactly. He is the petty officer's representative, and that's where how he got his name. He got kicked out on the officers because he was caught. He gave an interview to a weekly magazine saying that he was, with plans like the blueprints for a bomb he was going to explode, like for, in a terrorist attack, agitating for better pay for petty officers. And, the magazine reporter was like, shit, this is pretty wild. I better tell someone. So they told the military, like, someone's planning a terrorist attack. Like, you should probably like do something about it. And, the report didn't really identify who he was, but it was easy for the military to find out who they were talking about. So he is like a man, a guy that was raised in the military, but he's not really he wasn't very well seen by the top officers. One of the generals that was in charge of Brazil during the military dictatorship called him a bad soldier. Wow. But who's laughing now, I guess. But what is I think, and I think that we touch on something that is very relevant, not just to Brazil, but to what's happening now, like on the news, because since redemocratization, which was a result of a broad popular movement of resistance to the military dictatorship, right? There's like this mythology that, the military just got tired and decided to give people back the keys to power. But, obviously it wasn't like that. It was like a huge upswell of resistance that was building for years and years, la-di-da. And, ever since redemocratization, the military was kind of well domesticated, right? There were kept within the confines of not meddling into politics. And you can kind of trace back this cadre of officers that are very much ultra Bolsonaristas and who are super willing to dabble into politics and threaten the institutions, to the UN interventions in Haiti. So the kind of people who are interfering in Brazilian politics now are the same people who were sent to Haiti to do a sub-imperialist intervention. I love Lula. I'm a left-wing guy. I'm a Workers' Party supporter. But this is something that, the Workers' Party should look very deep into and like apologize to the people of Haiti, apologize to the people of Latin America, and learn the lesson of it, because this intervention in Haiti was disastrous, not only to, everything that it was purporting to build, like the self-determination of Haitian people, was definitely not served for that. And basically these guys were sent to Haiti where they learned how to exterminate and control populations. Come back to Brazil, this is when we see the escalating of the militarization of violence in the favelas, which has always been violence, right? Just going up there and killing everyone. But now it became organized. They had like armored vehicles and tactics and know-how that was developed in Haiti. And this core of officers are the ones that are now dabbling in politics. These guys got, they met, they got friendly and became a cohesive unit within the army in Haiti, which is just a disastrous thing for Brazil to have done. And this is something that we need to face and learn that, Brazil, as much as we like to think of ourselves as a progressive country, was complicit, and more than complicit, perhaps a protagonist in the repression of Haiti. I'm sure there's people who know Haitian history much better than I do, and who can be much more eloquent in explaining the consequences and reasons why this intervention was so disastrous. But this is something that Brazilians, especially left-wing Brazilians who are, as I am, admirers of Lula, we need to learn that this was bad and we shouldn't have done it, and we should never do it again.